We have one fact that has been stated as undeniable from two entirely different perspectives. The famous astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson succinctly says, we are all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, and to the rest of the universe atomically. And the revered Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh has said that we are here to awaken from our illusion of separation. That is, your sensation of, or your belief that you are separate from other people or from the earth itself is really just an illusion. I love the way that Eckhart Tolle says it, you are not in the universe, you are the universe, an intrinsic part of it. Ultimately, you are not a person, but a focal point where the universe is becoming conscious of itself. You are simply that part of the universe that is capable of contemplating your existence. Now, from both a scientific and a spiritual perspective, and I love the fact that even from a historical perspective, that Marcus Aurelius could have said that 2,000 years ago, and that wasn't rooted in Buddhist awareness or in scientific research. Somehow Marcus Aurelius was simply aware that somehow it is best to think of the universe as one organic whole that moves in relation to itself. These are the basic facts of our existence. We are all connected at the most fundamental level. So why then have we arrived at a time in history where there is so much partisanship, so much division, so much religious, political, economic animus, hatred, competition, violence? In the early days of our church, Michael Larson captured these two photographs that we've long displayed in our building. This is a photo of two children you know well from, what is this, Mike, maybe 7, 8 years ago, when Nola and Maya were younger. But this is a picture that I've kept up all these years because I think it preaches a sermon all by itself. It speaks to the innocence that children can experience before they have been carefully taught to feel prejudice. A lily white child and a black child not only find friendship, but you can tell by the way they're looking at each other that they are discovering a certain wonder, affection. They are celebrating each other's mere existence. Now this, I believe, is the natural state of the human condition before you have been taught prejudice. But this other picture that Mike took at another moment when we were celebrating a kind of symbolic baptism here in the church on an anniversary, captured this senior, is it okay to say senior Ruth? White woman, the wife of a retired Methodist pastor, lovingly touching the face of a young black gay man. Now, I think this is, in a way, a better sermon, because this is a sermon about how you can live in a world full of prejudice and not be drugged down to its level. And in fact, if a church exists for any particular good reason, surely one of those good reasons is to heal the divisions that the world has tried to put into your mind, the prejudices has tried to teach you. A church should be a safe place where you can restore that state that Nola and Maya had of being able to love each other without judgment or without awareness of that division. I asked Sean to sing that wonderful song from South Pacific because it captures, it's sad sometimes that show tunes do so much better than sermons, but to say you've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught year after year. You've got to have it drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly shaped or whose skin is a different shade. You got to be taught before it's too late, before you're 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. We learn prejudices, oftentimes from our families, but also from subtle messages that are just in the air around you. I don't remember racism being talked about a lot in my neighborhood, but I was aware that there weren't any black folks that lived around me, and I knew there was a neighborhood where black folks lived. And I would have been surprised, even though never consciously asking why, would have been surprised to see a black person living outside of the neighborhood where black people live. That little town where I grew up was 90% white, 10% black, and to the best of my knowledge, there was not a single Hispanic or Asian living there. We had one Jewish family, handful of Catholics. But my father was a case study in irrational prejudice. He was prejudiced against black people in general, though notably quite generous and compassionate towards the ones he actually knew. That never, strange division. But he hated Jews. But there was only one Jew in town, and Dad loved going to his shop to buy clothes because it was a great clothing store. And strangely, he hated all Asians and communists and socialists, and in a bizarre way, he thought they were the same. He thought Japan was a communist country because they were Asians. The only people who were communists who weren't Asians were labor union members. Now that makes my dad sound stupid, and I don't think he was. I think actually he was probably inherently quite bright, but what he was terribly gullible. He uncritically preserved the prejudice of his slave-owning ancestors. He accepted the anti-Catholic teachings of the Church of Christ, where he was taken to church. And he embodied the brainwashing of his military training. During World War II, the young men that were snatched up from rural farms in the Midwest, these boys weren't killers. They were not soldiers. They were rough in a lot of ways, but you had to turn them into fierce soldiers. So they were pilloried with these images of Nazis burning books and raping American women. And the Japanese were portrayed as monkeys with monkey ears and tails who were raping white women. Now, my dad wasn't stupid, but he was carefully taught by the United States Marine Corps. But that was a long time ago. Where's all this division coming from today? It's tempting to blame everything on Donald Trump. But he did not invent dog whistle politics. He is not the author of racism or xenophobia. But you remember what he said? The day that he launched his campaign, the very first day, it's a miracle that he said this and got elected, but his very first day, he said, when Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some of them, I assume, are good people. He wasn't inventing that xenophobia, he was just throwing a log on the fire of prejudice that has been smoldering in America for a very long time. A flame that I think had been building up for the 8 years that we had a black family living in the White House. And during the time when the United States kept trying to justify the military spending that they were increasing by teaching us to be afraid of Muslims. Now here is the fact that I am trying to talk about today. We are all connected. There is only the most slight differences between the biology of the races. There's slight differences really theologically among the world's religions. There are insubstantial differences based on language or nation of origin. I want you to hear me say this clearly. every attempt at fueling division, of building a wall between us and another nation, between banning immigration of Muslims, between exiling or deporting illegal aliens, all of that is trickery. It is a form of manipulation, of trying to get you to be afraid to believe that you are not connected to that Arab Muslim or that Hispanic immigrant. Now, Trump didn't invent the lie, but he knew how willing that Americans are to believe the lie. You may have seen tweets by the imaginary character Werner Herzog. Herzog doesn't exist, of course. It's a very clever internet invention in which someone is posting in the style of the German filmmaker Werner Herzog. But this one grabbed my attention recently, because it goes beyond clever imitation to possibly saying something that is shockingly true, as we have watched people trying to defend the recent practice of putting babies in cages along the southern border. Our Homeland Security Director, who is of Swedish descent, you can't get a lot whiter than this woman, who defends putting babies in cages and then went out to a Mexican restaurant for dinner. I mean, just how tone deaf can you be? That we are waking up to an America, as Germany once did, with an awareness that 1/3 of our people are willing to kill another third, while another third just watches, just lets it happen. There are some seriously messed up things going on in the world right now. Now, I've always been one to be very dismissive of people that keep bringing up Nazi stuff, that everything that goes wrong in the world is not just like Hitler. But this week, when Trump trotted out a group of people that he put on parade to say these people were victimized by illegal immigrants, that is a page out of Hitler's handbook, playbook, that illegal immigrants commit crimes in the United States at less than half the rate of folk that were born here. So illegal immigrants reduce our crime rate. I mean, it just factually, but he wants to bring them all out on stage to make you think that every immigrant is a criminal. Hitler used to publish lists of people who claimed that they had been victimized by Jews. This was a regular publication technique, and the implication is that all Jews are criminals. If you keep telling stories of people that are victimized by Jews, then he's trying to get Germans to think all Jews are criminals. And now you are being manipulated by the government of the United States into believing that all Hispanics are criminals. Now, this kind of propaganda can work. I'm afraid that the Russians very likely did change the outcome of our last presidential election, and they did it by filling social media with deceptive charges against Hillary Clinton. Now, it isn't that Clinton, or anybody else for that matter, was squeaky clean, but trying to blame her for the tragic deaths in Benghazi, that was crazy. Or even trying to blow using a private email server into being the most horrible crime since the abduction of the Lindbergh baby. That only worked on people that were willing to be led by the nose through manipulation into literally doing Russia's bidding at the ballot box by delivering their useful idiot to the White House. Now, I have a 3-point sermon today. I can't usually say that, but it just worked out that way. The first point that I really want you to remember and take to heart is we are all connected. It's a fundamental truth. It's true scientifically, it's true spiritually. The second point is that the world is being torn apart by those who insist upon dividing us, breaking up that unity, dividing us between Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, natives and immigrants, Christians and Muslims, the rich and the poor, the black, the brown, the white, the young and the old, the educated and the experienced. Trump's arrogance and ineptitude is increasing the chances of nuclear war breaking out in Asia, in the Middle East, or even here. The stakes are high. So we have to stay informed and we have to stay involved. But my third point is we must not become what we loathe. We have to remain meaningfully engaged, but we don't need to be drawn into the divisive battle in a way that turns us into the kind of people that we find to be repulsive. We can't be what we're trying to extinguish. And to that end, I want to say I really appreciate the classes that David Ketchum's been leading for us on meditation during class time. It's vitally true that if we are going to remain meaningfully engaged in fighting the injustice and insanity of the world, that in the process we must remain centered. We have to remain aware of our sane and peaceful unity with ourselves and others. We cannot make those who disagree with us our enemies. David often asks us to picture ourselves sitting on the bank of a river, and when negative forces try to take over our thinking, lead us into anger or hostility or division, he just keeps saying, just come back to the bank of the river. Just come back to that place and see yourself there. Now, of course, in monastic tradition, that's why there are icons in the cells of monks. They will have a meditation focus, or if you go into a Catholic or Orthodox church to pray, you'll be invited to light a candle and set it in front of an icon and to sit there and focus on that. We know in a lot of Buddhist tradition, it's simply the sound of a ringing bell. Whatever can take you back to the riverbank, whatever can pull you back to a place where you can remember that we are all connected, and that all attempts at leading you into prejudice and division are nothing but deception and manipulation. I have found myself lately coming back to this video of this little 2-year-old girl. Oh gosh, doesn't that feel good? Has nobody told her that she's black? That there are already millions of people who will not hire her? That her school will be full of dads who will not let their son take her to the prom? That there are movie producers who will never be able to see her inherent beauty? I don't even know if she knows that she's poor, and that most doors to education are already closed to her. I don't know if she knows that she's living in a dangerous neighborhood, and that she might have to fight one day just to keep her brother alive through his teen years. Now, maybe I'm being silly, and maybe I'm indulging myself in fantasy. I think she's got it covered. I think she hears something in her own spirit that makes me believe that she's on top of it. Now, I personally don't usually lose my cool. I don't think I get a lot of credit for it, but I can actually be quite patient, even in the face of mind-numbing stupidity. But I had one bad day this week. I had one really bad day. And it just so happened that I had to be a lot of different places. I had a lot of community organizing meetings to attend. And it seemed like that day was just the domino effect, where everyone who spoke to me said something that was dumber than the last person that spoke to me. And it was like the universe had turned to prove to me that the human race could not be redeemed, that they were just too stupid. The train jumped the tracks and was headed for the munitions factory. The world was about to blow up. So my very last meeting, and I hate that I walked out and left Andrew there, but I managed to get up and leave without betraying my thoughts to everyone in the room. And I got in the car and I started thinking, who can I force to listen to me rant right now? And it was just the time of day and the time of week where my usual victims were not available to me. Dan was still in China, you know. Everybody was at work or with their spouse or their kids or something. So I came home and I turned on this clip again of Coco, and I just tried to get centered again and remember that Trump had to reverse that business of separating families at the border, and that smart and caring people were working to restore those children to their families. And even if Melania's coat declared that she just doesn't care, there are a whole lot of people who do care who are going to vote in November, and that's just 4 months away. There's still a lot of prejudice in this country, but in 2045, there will no longer be a white majority in America. Some things are going to change then. Bienvenidos. There are bad things in the world. You've had false friends who have betrayed you. You've had family members who have rejected you. You've had love relationships that became toxic. People you have really cared about and needed have died on you. They've died on you before you were ready. Crazy, bad people become heads of state of powerful nations. They become the CEOs of big corporations, and sometimes they'll even take charge of the EPA and the State Department. I'm not asking you to deny those facts or to forget them. I am inviting you to rise above them. Don't let that bad stuff rent too much space in your skull. The people who have hurt you are not lying awake at night thinking about you. So why are you wasting your sleeping hours doing them the favor of thinking about them? Don't do your critics any favor. That person that told you that they would love you till the day they died, and now they're with somebody else and they're not even dead yet? They're not going out to dinner talking about you. Don't do them any favors. The best response that you can have to that is to rise above it and to be happy. Take a giant step above the mud puddle they tried to drag you down into. Folks, we are all connected. And the more we move away from the illusion of our separation, our perceptions of differences in race, gender, sexual orientation, nation of origin, political party, the more we move into the kind of spiritual integrity that we came here for in the first place.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.